Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and felt Earth's gravity pull at his boots. After 3 years fighting in space, even normal gravity felt heavy. He adjusted his military uniform and picked up his single bag. The spaceport was crowded with people rushing to catch flights to distant worlds. But Jake was going somewhere much closer to home. He walked through the busy terminal, his dark green uniform drawing looks from other travelers. 3 ribbons decorated his chest, including one that only a few hundred humans had ever earned. The Terran Defense Cross gleamed under the bright lights. Jake barely noticed the stairs. His mind was focused on why he had come back to Earth. His sister Lisa needed him. The hover taxi took 40 minutes to reach the campus of Meridian Technical Institute. Jake watched the familiar buildings grow larger through the window. 10 years ago, he had run away from this place. Now he was coming back, but everything was different. He was different. The taxi stopped at the main gate. Jake paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk, looking at the school that had once been his nightmare. The buildings looked exactly the same. Tall towers of white stone reached toward the sky. Green lawns stretched between them, perfectly maintained. Students walked in small groups, their voices carrying on the warm afternoon air. Nothing had changed. That was the problem. Jake found Lisa waiting by the fountain in the central courtyard. She looked small sitting on the stone edge, her dark hair falling over her face as she read from a tablet. At 19, she was brilliant. Her test scores were higher than anyone in her class. She had earned a full scholarship to study xenobiology, the science of alien life forms. She was also being bullied, just like Jake had been. "Hey, little sister," Jake said softly. Lisa looked up and smiled. The worry lines around her eyes disappeared for a moment. She jumped up and hugged him tightly. "I can't believe you're really here," she said. "When you sent that message saying you were coming home, I thought I was dreaming." Jake hugged her back. His sister felt so small in his arms. She reminded him of the colonists he had protected on distant worlds, innocent people who needed someone, strong to stand between them and danger. "I got leave time," Jake said. "Thought I'd help you move into your new dorm room." Lisa pulled back and looked at his uniform. Her fingers touched the ribbons on his chest. "What did you do to earn these?" she asked. Jake's face went serious. "Things I hope you never have to know about." They walked across the campus together. Lisa pointed out different buildings and told him about her classes. Jake listened, but his eyes watched the other students. He was looking for threats, the same way he had learned to scan for enemy ships in space. "That's the science building where I have most of my classes," Lisa said, pointing to a tall tower. "And over there is where the engineering students hang out." Jake saw them before Lisa did. A group of 5 young men walking toward them across the lawn. They moved like a pack, with one clearly in charge and the others following. Jake recognized the walk, the attitude, the way they took up more space than they needed. Bullies looked the same everywhere in the galaxy. "Lisa," Jake said quietly, "who are those guys?" Lisa followed his gaze, and her face went pale. "That's Connor Blake and his friends. Connor is the son of Dr. Blake, one of the professors here." Jake watched Connor Blake approach. The young man was tall and well-dressed, with perfectly styled brown hair and expensive clothes. His father's money showed in everything about him, from his confident walk to the way the other students moved out of his path. "The same Dr. Blake who used to teach here 10 years ago?" Jake asked. "You know him?" "We met," Jake said. His voice was calm, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Connor and his group reached them. The young man looked Jake up and down, taking in the military uniform and the ribbons. His expression was amused rather than worried. "Well, well," Connor said. "Lisa's big brother, the famous soldier boy? I heard you were coming back to visit our little school." Jake said nothing, He stood perfectly still, his hands at his sides. Lisa could feel tension radiating from him like heat from a fire. "My father told me about you," Connor continued. "Danny Morrison, right? The poor kid who couldn't handle a little teasing and ran away to play soldier." "My name is Jake," he said quietly. Connor laughed. "Right, you changed your name. Trying to be someone tough, I guess. Did the military teach you how to fight, Danny? Because you sure couldn't when you were here before." One of Connor's friends stepped closer. "My dad says you were always crying to the teachers, begging them to make the mean kids stop picking on you." Jake's expression didn't change. He looked at each of the young men carefully, memorizing their faces. Lisa noticed that his breathing had become very slow and controlled. "Leave him alone," Lisa said. Her voice shook a little. "He just got here." "Oh, we're not bothering your brother," Connor said. "We're just saying hello to an old friend. Isn't that right, Danny?" Jake finally spoke. "You should walk away now." The words were said so quietly that Connor had to lean forward to hear them. When he did, something in Jake's eyes made him take a step back. For just a moment, Connor saw something that made his confidence waver. Then the moment passed. Connor's friends were watching, and he couldn't look weak in front of them. "Or what? Soldier boy? You'll report me to your commanding officer?" Jake smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "No," he said. "I won't report you to anyone." Connor opened his mouth to say something else, but one of his friends touched his arm. "Come on, Connor. We should get going." Connor looked annoyed, but he nodded. "Sure. We'll see you around, Danny, and Lisa." He looked at Jake's sister with an expression that made Jake's hands curl into fists. "We'll definitely see you around." The group walked away, talking and laughing loudly. Lisa let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "I'm sorry," she said. "They're like that with everyone who isn't rich or connected. But they're worse with me because of the scholarship." Jake watched Connor and his friends disappear into one of the buildings. "How long has this been going on?" "Since I started here 3 months ago. It's not just name-calling. They've messed with my lab work, stolen my research notes, made sure I couldn't join any study groups." Lisa's voice was bitter. "Just like what happened to you." Jake turned to look at his sister. "Not exactly like what happened to me. What do you mean?" Jake picked up her bag and started walking toward the dormitory. 10 years ago, I was weak and alone. I had no idea how to fight back." He looked at the ribbons on his chest. "Things are different now." Lisa followed him, wondering what her brother had become during his years in space. She could see that he was no longer the scared teenager who had left Earth, but she wasn't sure if that was good or bad. Jake was thinking about Connor Blake and his friends. They reminded him of enemy commanders he had faced in the war, arrogant and cruel because they thought they were untouchable. They were about to learn how wrong they were. That night, Jake sat in his hotel room and stared at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept going back to the past, to memories he had tried to bury for 10 years. Danny Morrison had been 15 when he first walked through the gates of Meridian Technical Institute. His mother had worked 3 jobs to pay for his education. She cleaned offices at night, served food during the day, and took in laundry on weekends. Danny was smart enough to earn a partial scholarship, but it wasn't enough to cover everything. Other students knew he was poor. They could tell from his second-hand clothes and his nervous way of eating lunch alone. But it was Trevor Blake who made Danny's life a nightmare. Trevor was 17 then, the son of a famous scientist, and already acting like he owned the school. He was tall and handsome, with perfect teeth and expensive clothes. Everything came easy to him because his family had money and connections. Danny remembered the first time Trevor noticed him. It was in physics class, and Danny had solved a problem that stumped everyone else. The teacher praised him in front of the whole class. Danny felt proud for about 5 minutes dot, then Trevor cornered him after class. "Think you're smart, don't you, charity case?" Trevor had said. "Let me teach you how things really work here." What followed were 2 years of daily humiliation. Trevor and his friends would knock books out of Danny's hands in the hallways. They would sit behind him in class and whisper cruel jokes about his clothes, his mother's jobs, his free lunch tickets. They made sure he was never included in group projects, never invited to parties, never allowed to feel like he belonged. The worst part wasn't the name-calling or the pranks. It was how the other students watched and did nothing. Teachers saw what was happening, but looked the other way, because Trevor's father donated money to the school. Danny learned that justice was something rich people bought, not something poor people received. Jake rolled over in his hotel bed and tried to push the memories away. But they kept coming. He remembered the day Trevor destroyed his science project. Danny had spent months building a working model of a fusion reactor. It was beautiful and complex, and his teacher said it was the best student work she had ever seen. Danny dreamed it might win the science fair and earn him a full scholarship to University. Trevor and his friends broke into the lab the night before the fair. They smashed Danny's project into pieces and scattered the parts across the floor. When Danny found it the next morning, he sat in the empty classroom and cried. That was the night he walked to the military recruitment office. Now Jake was back, and history was repeating itself. But this time, he wasn't powerless. The next morning, Jake met Lisa for breakfast in the student cafeteria. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. "Bad night?" Jake asked. "Someone got into my lab space," Lisa said quietly. "They destroyed 3 weeks of research. All my cell cultures are dead." Jake's hand tightened around his coffee cup. "Do you know who did it?" "I can guess, but I can't prove anything." Lisa stirred her food without eating. "Maybe I should just transfer to another school?" "This place isn't worth it." "Yes, it is," Jake said firmly. "You earned your place here. You're smarter than any of them. Don't let them win." Lisa looked at her brother's face. There was something different about his expression, something hard and determined. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Nothing violent," Jake said. "I learned better ways to fight in the military." After breakfast, Jake walked Lisa to her first class. He watched her disappear into the science building, then turned and headed across campus. He had business to take care of. The administration building was quiet in the early morning. Jake found the office he was looking for on the 3rd floor. The nameplate on the door read, "Dr. Trevor Blake, Department of Physics." Jake knocked and entered without waiting for permission. Trevor Blake looked up from his desk. He was older now, with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes. But his expression of amused superiority was exactly the same. Well, Danny Morrison." Trevor leaned back in his expensive chair. "I wondered when you'd come crawling back here." "It's Jake now," he said, closing the door behind him. "Right, your little soldier name. Do you feel tough now, Danny? Did the military teach you how to be a man?" Jake walked to the window and looked out at the campus. Students were hurrying to classes, carrying bags full of dreams and hopes. Some of them were probably poor kids like he had been, working hard to earn their place. "I learned a lot in the military," Jake said. "Want to know what I learned?" Trevor smirked. "Enlighten me." Jake turned around. "I learned that bullies are the same everywhere in the galaxy. They pick on people who can't fight back because it makes them feel powerful, but they're really just cowards." "Careful, Danny. You're talking to a professor now. I could have you banned from this campus. Could you?" Jake pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. A recording started playing. Connor's voice filled the room. "My father told me about you. Danny Morrison, right? The poor kid who couldn't handle a little teasing and ran away to play soldier. Then another voice, one of Connor's friends. My dad says you were always crying to the teachers, begging them to make the mean kids stop picking on you. Trevor's face went pale. Where did you get that? Military surveillance training, Jake said. Amazing what you can pick up with the right equipment. Your son was very chatty yesterday. Jake tapped his phone again. This time it was Connor's. Voice from a different conversation. We'll mess with her lab work again tonight. Dad says the scholarship kids need to know their place. Trevor stood up quickly. That proves nothing. Maybe not by itself, Jake agreed. But I've been busy since yesterday. Want to hear more? Jake played another recording. This one was Connor talking to his friends about cheating on exams, about paying other students to do their homework, about using his father's influence to get grades changed. Stop, Trevor said. His confident smile was gone. There's more, Jake sighed. Lots more. Connor really likes to talk about all the rules he breaks. He seems to think his daddy will protect him no matter what he does. Jake put his phone away and looked directly at Trevor. Here's what's going to happen. Your son and his friends are going to leave my sister alone. Completely alone. No more destroyed experiments. No more stolen research. No more harassment of any kind. You can't threaten me, Trevor said, but his voice shook. I'm not threatening you, Jake said calmly. I'm explaining consequences. If anything happens to Lisa, these recordings go to the school board, the local news, and the Military Academy Review Board that's considering Connor's application. Trevor's eyes went wide. How did you know about that? I told you. I learned. Things in the military. Information warfare is a real skill. Jake moved toward the door. Connor wants to be an officer? Officers are supposed to protect the weak, not prey on them. The review board would be very interested to hear how he really behaves. Jake opened the door, then paused. Oh, and Trevor? If you think about retaliating against Lisa through her grades or her lab access, remember that I'm not the scared 15-year-old you used to know. I've spent 3 years protecting humanity from things that would give you nightmares. Your little campus politics don't scare me. Jake left Trevor sitting at his desk, staring at the closed door. Later that afternoon, Jake found Lisa in the library. She was hunched over her tablet, trying to recreate her lost research from memory. How's it going? Jake asked, sitting down beside her. Slowly. I'll have to start some of the experiments over from scratch. Lisa looked frustrated. It's going to set me back weeks. Maybe not, Jake said. He pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. Molecular scanner. Military grade. It can analyze the residue in your lab and tell you exactly what chemicals were used to destroy your cultures. Lisa stared at the device. Jake, where did you get this? This kind of equipment costs more than most people make in a year. Combat pay adds up, Jake said. Besides, I have friends in the supply department. Lisa picked up the scanner. It was small and sleek, far more advanced than anything the school had. This could help me figure out what went wrong, she said. Maybe even improve my original research. That's the idea, Jake said. Fight back with intelligence, not anger. As they left the library together, Lisa noticed that other students were looking at Jake differently. Word had spread about the decorated veteran who was visiting campus. Some looked curious, others respectful. But Connor Blake and his friends were nowhere to be seen. Jake, Lisa said as they walked toward her dorm. What did you do today? Jake smiled. I reminded some people that actions have consequences. Nothing more, nothing less. Is that all? Jake stopped walking and looked at his sister. Lisa, I spent 3 years fighting in space to protect humanity. I'm not going to let a bunch of spoiled rich kids destroy my sister's future. Lisa hugged him tightly. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Behind them, Neither of them noticed Trevor, Blake watching from his office window, his face twisted with rage and fear. 3 days passed quietly. Connor Blake and his friends stayed away from Lisa, but Jake knew it wouldn't last. Bullies like Connor didn't give up easily. They just got more careful and more cruel. Jake spent those 3 days watching and learning. He sat in the cafeteria during lunch, observing how students interacted. He walked through the halls between classes, noting who held power and who was afraid. He used skills learned in military intelligence to map the social structure of the school. What he found made him angry. The bullying wasn't random. It was systematic. Connor and his friends targeted scholarship students, kids from poor families, anyone who didn't fit their idea of who belonged at Meridian Technical Institute. They had turned harassment into an art form, always staying just below the level. That would get them in serious trouble. Jake also discovered something else. Connor wasn't just his father's son in attitude. He was following Trevor's exact playbook from 20 years ago, using the same tactics, the same cruel jokes, even some of the same insults. It was time to change the game. On Thursday morning, Jake walked into the registrar's office. The woman behind the desk looked up at his military uniform with interest. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'd like to enroll as a graduate student," Jake said. "I have my military education benefits and my transcripts from correspondence courses." The woman looked surprised. "Classes started 3 months ago. It's very unusual to enroll this late." Jake smiled. "I've been fighting in space for 3 years. I'm used to unusual situations." 2 hours later, Jake Morrison was officially a student at Meridian Technical Institute. His first class was Advanced Physics, taught by Dr. Trevor Blake. Jake arrived early and took a seat in the back row. Other students filed in, most of them looking tired from heavy course loads. Jake recognized several faces from Connor's group of friends. Trevor entered the room and stopped dead when he saw Jake. For a moment, his confident professor act slipped. "We have a new student joining us today," Trevor announced, recovering his composure. "Mr. Morrison is a military veteran who thinks he can handle graduate-level physics." Some students turned to look at Jake. He sat quietly, his notebook open, pen ready. "Let's see what our soldier boy has learned," Trevor continued. He walked to the blackboard and wrote out a complex equation. "Mr. Morrison, perhaps you can solve this for us?" Jake studied the equation. It was designed to be impossible for someone without years of advanced study. Trevor was trying to humiliate him in front of the class, just like he had done 20 years ago. But Jake wasn't Danny Morrison anymore. Jake stood and walked to the board. He studied the equation for 30 seconds, then began writing. His solution was quick and confident, each step flowing naturally from the last. When he finished, the classroom was silent. The equation was solved perfectly. "Interesting approach," Trevor said through gritted teeth. "Where did you learn to do orbital mechanics?" "Calculations? When you're piloting attack fighters around gas giants, you learn math fast," Jake replied. "Get it wrong and you die." A student in the front row raised her hand. "You flew fighters in the war?" Jake nodded. 3 years. Fought at Kepler Station, the Centauri defense, and the Battle of the Outer Rim. The students looked impressed. These were battles they had heard about on the news, desperate fights where humanity barely survived against alien attackers. "Tell us about Kepler Station," another student asked. Trevor tried to regain control. "This is a physics class, not a war story session." "Actually," Jake said, "Kepler Station is a perfect physics example." He turned to the blackboard and began drawing. "Imagine you're defending a space station. Enemy ships are coming in fast, using the gravity of 3 different moons to accelerate. You have to calculate intercept courses for your fighters while accounting for gravitational effects, time dilation, and relativistic velocities. Jake filled the board with calculations, explaining each step. The students listened in fascination as he described real combat situations where split-second physics calculations meant the difference between life and death. The enemy thought they were clever, using the moon's gravity to boost their speed, Jake continued. But they forgot that gravity works both ways. We use the same gravitational field to slingshot our fighters behind them at twice their velocity. When Jake finished, the whole class was staring at him. These weren't just abstract equations anymore. They were tools that real people used to protect humanity among the stars. Trevor's face was red with anger and embarrassment. His carefully planned humiliation had backfired completely. After class, students crowded around Jake with questions. They wanted to know about space combat, about alien technology, about what it was really like to fight for humanity's survival. Jake answered their questions patiently, but he watched Trevor leave the room. The professor's hands were shaking with rage. Over the next week, Jake attended all of Trevor's classes. Each time Trevor tried to embarrass him, Jake turned it into a lesson about real-world applications of physics. The students began to see their professor differently. Trevor's abstract theories seemed less impressive compared to Jake's practical experience. But Jake's real work was happening outside the classroom. He started a study group for struggling students, especially those from poor backgrounds. He helped them with homework, explained difficult concepts, and shared study techniques he had learned in military training. For the first time, scholarship students had someone looking out for them. Jake also began documenting everything. He recorded Connor's conversations, photographed evidence of harassment, and built detailed files on every incident of bullying. He used military surveillance techniques to gather information that would have been impossible for a civilian to obtain. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening. Jake was walking across campus when he heard voices from behind the science building. He recognized Connor's laugh and moved closer to listen. "Did you see the look on that scholarship girl's face when she found her research destroyed?" Connor was saying. "I thought she was going to cry." "Your dad's going to love hearing about this," one of his friends replied. "He hates those charity cases as much as you do." Jake's blood went cold. They weren't talking about Lisa. There was another victim. He followed the sound of voices and found Connor's group surrounding a young man near the dumpsters. The victim was small and nervous, clutching a backpack to his chest like a shield. "Please," the student was saying, "I need those notes for tomorrow's exam. I worked all semester on that research." "Should have thought about that before you made our professor look stupid in class," Connor said. He held a tablet computer just out of the student's reach. "Maybe next time you'll remember your place." Connor dropped the tablet on the concrete. It shattered into pieces. The student fell to his knees, trying to gather the broken fragments. "You don't understand," he whispered. "This was everything. My whole project." Jake had seen enough. He stepped out of the shadows. Connor, and his friends spun around. When they saw Jake, their confident expressions faltered. "The soldier boy," Connor sneered, but his voice wasn't as steady as usual. "Come to rescue another charity case?" "Walk away," Jake said quietly. "All of you. Now, or what?" Connor stepped closer, trying to look tough in front of his friends. "You'll beat us up? You'll get kicked out of school and court-martialed for assaulting civilians." Jake smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Connor, do you know what I did before I became a fighter pilot?" Connor looked uncertain. "I don't care. I was a military intelligence specialist. I know how to destroy people without laying a finger on them." Jake pulled out his phone. "Want to hear some interesting recordings?" Jake played back Connor's own words from moments earlier, his voice clear and damning. Then he played older recordings, conversations about cheating, about destroying other students' work, about using his father's influence to avoid consequences. Connor's face went white. You can't use those. It's illegal to record people without permission. On a public campus? Actually, it's completely legal. Jake put his phone away. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is what I found when I started investigating your family's finances. Trevor Blake had made a mistake. His hatred of Jake had made him careless. Jake had used military contacts to dig into the Blake family's background, and what he found was explosive. Your father has been stealing research from his graduate students for 15 years, Jake said, publishing their work under his name, taking credit for their discoveries. I have documentation going back to when I was a student here. Connor's friends began backing away. They could sense that this was bigger than campus bullying. You're lying, Connor said, but his voice shook. I have emails, financial records, publication dates, everything. Jake looked at the student on the ground, still trying to save his broken research, including proof that your father deliberately destroyed student work to prevent them from publishing before he could steal their ideas. Jake helped the young man to his feet. What's your name? Peter Chun, the student whispered. Peter, how? Would you like to see your research published in a real scientific journal? With your name on it, not some professor's? Peter's eyes went wide. Is that possible? Trevor Blake sat in his office, staring at the resignation letter on his computer screen. His hands shook as he reached for his coffee cup. The academic fraud investigation had moved faster than he expected. Military intelligence was thorough, when they wanted to be. A knock on his door made him jump. Come in, he called, expecting another investigator or another angry administrator. Instead, Jake Morrison entered and closed the door behind him. You, Trevor snarled, you destroyed everything. 20 years of work, my reputation, my son's future. You destroyed yourself, Jake said calmly. He sat down across from Trevor's desk. I just gave you enough rope. Trevor's face was red with rage. Connor had to transfer schools. Do you know what that did to him? He was supposed to graduate with honors, get into the military academy. Connor is a bully and a cheat, Jake replied. The military academy deserves better. He's just a kid. He made mistakes. Jake leaned forward. Trevor, when I was in space fighting aliens, I served with 18-year-old kids who risked their lives to protect strangers. Connor is older than they were, and he spent his time destroying other people's dreams for fun. Trevor stood up and paced behind his desk. You don't understand. This school, these positions, they're not just jobs. They're legacies. My father taught here, my grandfather before him. The Blake family built this institution. And you used that legacy to hurt innocent people, Jake said. For 20 years, you stole research from students who trusted you. You turned education into a weapon against the poor. Those students were nobodies. They would have wasted their discoveries, published in minor journals that no one reads. I made their work important. Jake stood up slowly. You stole their futures, just like you tried to steal mine. Trevor stopped pacing. Your future? You? Were nothing, Danny. A scared little boy from the wrong side of town. I did you a favor by showing you how the world really works. Maybe you did, Jake said. You taught me that there are people in this world who use their power to hurt others. And you taught me that someone needs to stop them. Trevor reached into his desk drawer. Jake tensed, ready for anything. But Trevor only pulled out an old photograph. This was Connor when he was 8, Trevor said, holding up the picture. Smart, curious, asking questions about everything. You? Destroyed that boy. Jake looked at the photograph. Connor had been a normal kid once, before his father taught him to see other people as targets. You destroyed him yourself, Jake said. You taught him that being cruel was the same as being strong. You made him into a copy of you. And what did the military make you into? Trevor asked. A killer? A destroyer of families? Jake was quiet for a long moment. They made me into someone who protects people. Someone who stands between innocent civilians and the things that want to hurt them. Trevor laughed bitterly. Is that what you think you are? A protector? You're just another bully with better training. No, Jake said. A bully hurts people who can't fight back. I stop people who hurt others. Trevor crumpled the photograph in his hands. It doesn't matter. You've won. I'm resigning, Connor is. Gone. And your little sister gets to play scientist. Congratulations. Jake walked to the window and looked out at the campus. Students were walking between classes, carrying books and tablets, their faces bright with possibility. Among them, he could see Peter Chun, no longer hunched over in fear. Lisa was there too, talking animatedly with a group of other science students. This was never about winning, Jake said. It was about making sure other kids don't go through what I did. How noble, Trevor said sarcastically. Jake turned back to face him. Trevor, you still don't understand. This isn't punishment. It's consequences. Every choice has results. You chose to be cruel, to steal, to hurt people weaker than you. Now you face the results of those choices. Trevor sat down heavily in his chair. So what happens now? You ride. Off into the sunset, the hero of your own story. Now I go back to space, Jake said. The war isn't over. Humanity still needs defenders. And you leave behind another broken family? Jake walked to the door, then paused. Trevor, you broke your own family when you taught your son to hate instead of love, to destroy instead of create. I just made sure he couldn't break anyone else's. Jake left Trevor alone in his office and walked across campus one last time. His orders had come through that morning. The Terran Defense Force needed him back at the Outer Rim, where new alien threats were gathering. He found Lisa in her lab, working late on a new experiment. She looked up when he entered, and her face fell when she saw his expression. You're leaving, she said. It wasn't a question. Tomorrow morning, Jake confirmed. New assignment. Lisa set down her tools and hugged him tightly. I'm going to miss you. I'll miss you too. But you don't need me anymore. Look around. Lisa looked at her lab. It was full of students working together, sharing equipment and ideas. Rich kids and scholarship students worked side by side, helping each other with difficult problems. The toxic atmosphere that had poisoned the school for decades was finally clearing. You did this, Lisa said. We all did this, Jake corrected. I just gave people permission to stand up for themselves. They walked to the student center together. The evening study groups were in full swing, and Jake was pleased to see how many students were participating. Peter Chun was tutoring younger students in physics. Other scholarship recipients were forming their own support networks. Jake's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Commander Sarah Williams, his old squadron leader. Morrison, we need you back. New alien contacts on the frontier. Situation unclear, but potentially hostile. Transport leaves Earth tomorrow at 0800. Don't be late. Williams. Jake showed the message to Lisa. She read it and sighed. More fighting, she said. Maybe. Or maybe diplomacy. The military learned that sometimes the best weapon is understanding. Jake put his arm around his sister's shoulders, just like here. The next morning, Jake stood at the same spaceport where he had arrived a week earlier. Lisa was there to see him off, along with Peter Chun and a dozen other students whose lives had changed during his visit. Thank you, Peter said, shaking Jake's hand for everything. Take care of each other, Jake replied. That's how we make humanity stronger. As Jake walked toward his transport, he passed a news display showing headlines about the academic fraud scandal at Meridian Technical Institute. The story was spreading to other schools. prompting investigations and reforms across the education system. Jake smiled. Sometimes the most important battles were fought not in space against aliens, but at home against the worst parts of human nature. He boarded the transport and found his seat. Through the window, he could see Earth shrinking. Below him, somewhere down there, Lisa was pursuing her dreams without fear. Peter Chun was publishing research under his own name. Students from poor families were getting the education they deserved. Jake opened his mission briefing and began reading about his new assignment. The aliens they were going to contact were reported to be highly intelligent but aggressive, with a rigid social hierarchy based on strength and dominance. Jake chuckled. After dealing with Trevor Blake and Connor, a few alien bullies didn't seem so scary. The transport jumped to hyperspace, carrying Jake back to the stars. Behind him, Earth continued turning, a little bit better than when he had found it. In her lab, Lisa looked up at the night sky and smiled. Her brother was out there somewhere, protecting humanity from threats, both alien and human. She went back to her research, knowing that her work might someday help him and others like him. The bullies were gone. The future was bright, and humanity continued its long journey toward becoming something better than it had been before. In the end, that was what humanity meant in the galaxy. Not just the ability to fight and survive, but the willingness to change, to grow, and to protect those who needed protection. It was people like Jake Morrison, carrying that spirit to the stars, one planet at a time. The war hero had returned to school, faced his old bullies, and won. But his real victory wasn't defeating Trevor Blake or Connor. It was showing others that they had the power to stand up for themselves and each other. That was a lesson that would echo through the halls of Meridian Technical Institute for generations to come, and eventually through the stars themselves.